What is up, GBA? We are back this week for week 10 of Power Rankings. This week I am not alone, thank God, because last week was horrible. I felt so pressured. I do have my partner back with me this week. What's up, Jar?
Man, you can fucking ramble. 51 minutes and you're alone. I have no idea how you pulled that off, but...
Dude, look, your notes are huge. I have no idea how you condense them into such small bits, but you do a very good job at that, and I will give you that.
I'm the best analyst, so...
Anyway, moving on, we are in week 10, guys. We are 2 weeks away from playoffs, so power rankings are going to change a little bit. There are going to be some teams that we talk about a little bit less, so I'll let Jar start us off on that.
So basically what's going to happen is if a team has been eliminated from playoff contention, mathematically, so even if, like, they have to win all their games and the top player in the division has to lose all their games, we're still going to talk about them as we normally would. But if a team has been mathematically eliminated from playoffs, we're not going to spend too much time on that team to speed up the series and keep you guys fresh on who's in the kind of running still, who still has a chance to make playoffs. Sorry if that hurts your favorite team as if they've been eliminated at this point, but that can walk us right into number 16. We both still have old man Tup, and like I said, we're not going to spend too long. So Tup, yes, has been mathematically kicked out of playoffs. That happens when you do not win a game for the first 10 weeks. So we won't spend too much time on him. He lost to Chimp 3-0 in a game where Azu had an amazing matchup and Chimp brought the perfect set. I want to talk about that a lot more when we get to Chimp, but Tup, I definitely want to see you take a game before the season is over, my dude. I believe.
Yeah, the only thing that I have to say about Tup is I can hear the frustration in his voice, especially in his commentary. I did watch his side, and I just want to tell him, look, dude, it's okay. Just have fun with the rest of the season. Don't worry about it too much. Even if you go 0-12, it's just a bad season. It happens to everybody, and
except Jar.
Except Jar, and you'll have a better season. You're gonna draft better mons next time around. I know you're gonna bounce right back. Don't worry, we've seen great things from you in the past, so hope to see you again next season. Moving on to number 15, of course, another one that we can somewhat skip. Steve, we have who played Tom this week. Steve ended up screwing himself by tricking away his own choice scarf to Tom. Once again, we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but Steve is also out of playoff contention.
Yep, he basically shot himself in the foot this week, but Steve, I'm excited to see what memes you can bring to end the season off and hopefully give us some entertaining content and continue to do so. At number 14, surprisingly, Dan, aka A-Drive, has actually been mathematically eliminated from playoff contention as well at this point. He got 2-0'd by George this week. He did misplay with his Tracheon, but it was definitely a very fun game to watch. He played a very good battler pretty close to the chest. I sincerely hope Dan has enjoyed his season, or at least can enjoy the end of his season, regardless of his record, because I do very much enjoy his content and videos, but Dan's season is sadly going to be wrapped up for the time being.
I actually have quite a few notes on Dan, and I do want to talk about him a little bit because it was only as of this week that he was officially eliminated from playoffs, whereas Tup and Steve, we've seen it coming for a long time. So I had to put him down at number 14 this week simply because he hasn't gotten a win since Mono, and before that it was Tup, who's at our number 16 and has always been. So I do understand he's one of our top 5's only losses this season, but he hasn't beaten teams that he's supposed to beat, supposed to in quotations. What I mean by that is Dan was a feared player to play against last generation, and I'm not feeling that same fear from him now. The Victini was cool, really cool, but when you're behind like you are, and you gain a huge momentum swing like that, like you did with the Trick Room, you have to capitalize on that, and you have to predict the Garchomp coming in. You have to glaciate on that turn. You have to make plays to put yourself back into the game. And I really feel like Dan just had a hard time getting a grip of his team and getting used to it this season. I think he drafted a lot of things that he wasn't comfortable with. I think he's learned his lesson. I think everybody has a season like that when they're playing Draft League format. And I'm really looking forward to when he bounces back and comes back once again as the St. Louis Rampardos. So hopefully we see him again next season. And yeah, that's it. So he is eliminated from playoffs once again. Moving on into number 13. Now, this is actually a player who has not a horrible record. However, we have to put him down at number 13 this week, and Jar will agree with me because Nekro Stevo. I don't know about everyone else, but every time I watch one of Nekro's games, I feel like I'm watching a copy-paste team from a prior week. I've said that before, and I had to give him a huge drop this week because I think it was what you said 2 weeks ago, that these rankings are heavily based on if a team is bad shit scary to face, or if they just look like a free win. And while I'm not saying that Nekro is necessarily a free win for anybody, he may be starting to give that impression to his opponents. He's currently 2-4 after taking over the Utah Jasmine, and I believe his 4 losses are over the last 5 weeks, with his only win in that period being over Steve. So his playoff hopes, I don't believe, are over. But if
he's actually has one of the better records to still make playoffs, especially with his division. But
exactly.
Yeah, he's definitely struggling.
Yeah, and I don't believe they're not over, but I don't think he's gonna make it if he keeps going this way. So, let alone how far he is, it doesn't really matter, because even if he makes it into playoffs, what's gonna happen then if he keeps up this trend of continuing to bring predictable teams and not being a scary player to anybody?
Yeah, I agree. I also dropped him to 13. I said this a few weeks ago. I was the first person to kind of drop Nekro a little bit because, you know, I kind of addressed Cooper did leave him a very solid record. And while I don't think he's a bad player, I think he is becoming a little bit predictable. I do want to say this. He said that he had to be a little creative. It didn't work out well versus Crimson. I don't think it's necessarily his creativity that has cost him games. I think it's his, it was versus Crimson. It was the 50-50s he got wrong, and that cost him that game. In this game, I just feel like Callum was not the number 13 or 14 even team we pegged him to be this week. He did not look like he was playing one of the bottom teams in the league, and that was just an unfortunate matchup maybe. And I think this game, and the reason I dropped Steve-O so much, was something he actually addressed: his prep. We say it all the time. Prep is 70, if not 60, if not 70% of the battle, all right? And he said that the team he brought was not going to be good enough to beat the team Callum brought. It lost a team matchup, basically. And I gotta kind of agree with him. Callum brought a lot of really good sets, and he seemed to be going toe-to-toe with him for most of the battle. The prep, Breloom without Rock Tomb without Technician was interesting, especially when he has an Infiltrator mon and you're bringing sub on it. That was interesting. I didn't know about that. Sandforce Hippo was really smart. Trick Room Reuniclus was cool, but I don't know if it was actually going to beat a lot of Callum's walls, because Callum does have a lot of bulk without Calm Mind. I don't know if you could EV an Aromatisse to take those hits. AV Lantern, that was some prep I did not like, because it was just max, and a lot of Callum's team is entirely physical from what I can see. I think he's got very few special attackers on his team, actually, when I was looking back at his roster. And his play, there wasn't too much hacks in this game, and I don't think, like I said, I don't think he necessarily played bad, but I just think it came down to his prep. He lost to a team who's been towards the bottom lately. Like you said, his only win was against Steve. He still has a lot of potential with, I believe, what is a 5-5 record now, actually. So he could still make the playoffs, but he's definitely on a cold streak, so I'm going to have to drop him for now. But that can lead us right to his opponent for this week, who was Callum, aka Hoodlum Scrafty. I have Callum. I moved him up quite a bit because, like I said, I think you're seeing Callum's improvement in league format in this game especially. He's still in the playoff race technically, so I'm going to bump him up because I like the way he played Steve-O, and I've seen a lot of improvement in him. His losses, he's learning, and in his wins, it's showing through that learning. His prep was very, very solid this week. Like I said, I think he predicted most of what Steve-O was going to bring very, very well. One thing, Embor gets Grass Knot. I 100% would have ran that because he has a Hippowdon. You weren't really breaking a Hippowdon with that Embor set, so just know for that for the future. Shaman was very, very good, and the Snorlax was really, really smart as well. And the Frostlass was a good bring. I don't know why it didn't come in till the last turn, considering it was a Spike Destiny Bond user, but it was able to be preserved for the late game, and he played really well. I don't believe at any point someone had like a definitive control of the game, but I think it was his solid prep that just allowed him to wear Steve-O's team down. Some good predictions, like the Psychic with the Shaman that knocked out the Breloom clean, just attacking the Reuniclus, getting damage off on that thing. He is learning the importance of prep, like I can see at the end of his video, and I'd like to see him contribute a little bit more of that knowledge to his own prep, but at the time, I think you're seeing a lot of progress with Callum.
Yeah, well, the first note I was going to say was, I'm not sure if this put him back in the playoff race or not, but you clarified that. I personally didn't do the math, but regardless, Callum played and prepped at another level this week. Even though he didn't fully build the team, he knew what each and every Mon was made to do, and either he has a very reliable front office that let him know everything, or he's even better than what this game showed. Because we critiqued him on that a couple of weeks back, on having teams built for him and then not knowing what to do with the Mons. He knew that he had to get the Reuniclus weakened, and just went for Seed Flare on the turn that it went for Trick Room, which allowed him to 2-hit KO the Reuniclus regardless of the Spit F drop. He scouted the Lantern beautifully with his Rotom, had switch-ins for everything. I don't even disagree with going for rest on the turn that he did with Snorlax, because Thunder Punch isn't killing a Manaphy, and if he let himself get too low, the Manaphy could have been a real issue at the end of the game. Despite him having Destiny Bond on his Frostlass, we saw the Z Rain Dance. So I was very impressed by all things Hoodlum Scrafty this week, and I hope that we can see more of it in his next match against Steve. So yeah, let's move on to we have Duncan. We have Duncan at number 12.
Some of us don't have Duncan.
Yeah, well, you have Duncan. No, you have Duncan at 10. Excuse me. I have Duncan at 11. What am I saying? So Duncan this week went up against a pretty hefty opponent, and he almost made it out with a win. And a few fortunate misses, or I guess you could say a few unfortunate ones for him, and then a few fortunate ones for him were able to put him back in the game near the end. The Venusaur had a very good chance of sweeping. I like how he's using Sun. We didn't see it at the beginning of the season for Duncan, but now we're seeing it a lot more. He's bringing it a lot more reliably, and it's actually doing work. It almost did a lot of work to Chimp. It did a lot of work to Mono this week, so I was extremely impressed with Duncan, despite dropping him down one spot on my rankings. That's simply because of the loss, because despite that, Duncan had a very solid game.
So I have Duncan at 10 because I kind of like the way he's been playing. He does have one of the harder schedules in the league, in my opinion. I believe has to play Mono and Chimp twice, or just Chimp. It might just be Chimp. But both. Yeah, okay, so that's what I thought. He had a very solid game versus Mono, who has been a very consistent one of the top battlers in the league this season. And it was a very, very close game. He had some cool prep with the Araquanid. The Weavile was really smart. Sun was a tremendous bring versus Mono's team. He has no resist for Venus coverage. The one thing that I want to say is that don't expect generic showdown spreads to be accurate when facing a player like Monotui. Mono, I could almost guarantee you on that Rachi when it came in, he was either Akaberry or he had enough SPDF to guaranteed live that HP fire from the Venusaur, and that's just something that comes from knowing the player you're playing. Mono knew you had Sun and he has a Jirachi, and he knew I need this many EVs and able to kill. You did get a little bit lucky with the Zen Headbutt miss, but you had a little bit of unfortunate luck, but do not stay in on bulky waters with something you don't want to get burned. I know you said Weavile wasn't too important, but I think it could have put in a little bit more work. Overall, his play was actually pretty good. He got a bit lucky at times, a bit unlucky at times. Like you said, Pokemon is a game of statistics, of rolls, of all that garbage. But he did play a very, very good battler, very, very close to the chest, and actually almost won him the game at the end. He just ran out of Sun turns before he could put himself in a position to finish the game off. One thing I'll say, don't expect to two-hit KO a Rhydon with a physically offensive move that I don't believe was Stab. I think he was clicking Earthquake versus it. And the thing is that Rhydon has an Eviolite and an extremely high defense stat, so you're going to probably lose that exchange, but the Shuka was a very smart ring on your part. Overall, I think Duncan just needs to have a few more adapts to League format, like anticipating good players to pack the exact right Showdown EV, not just an exact Showdown EV spread, but the right spread, and then playing the game a little bit less risky, like staying in with a Weavile, which you really didn't want to lose on a Mantine because it's bound to get Scald burned. That's how Scald works. But overall, I really liked what Duncan did, and I didn't want to drop him too much because he has been on a little bit of a hot streak as of late. I know he started the season like 1-4, and now he's like, what, 4-6 or something?
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to apologize really quickly because I did skip over Tom, who I was supposed to speak about, and I didn't even notice that. But I will let you start on Tom. So if you want to take it away.
I have Tom at 11. Where do you have? You have him at 10, right? Okay, so I have Tom at number 11 because even though he did pick up a win this week, it was versus Steve. Not to diminish his win or his work, but Steve has been consistently a non-winning battler throughout the season. He still has playoff potential, so we would like to see how well he can do and wrap his season up. But the thing is, he beat Steve 1-0. I think prep-wise, he had very, very solid prep, besides lacking a Revenge Killer for Starmie. But I think this game and a few others throughout the season have kind of revealed a lot of negatives about Tom's team. He does have things to take on certain threats like Starmie. For example, he could have brought a SPDF P2. Starmie would have done absolutely nothing in the game. The problem is, some some of his walls he needs to bring sometimes are potentially setup fodder for other things on the team his opponent has. For example, in this case, P2 could have been setup fodder for Como, and that could have led to a few problems in that case. His Nidoqueen worked perfectly. That spread completely destroyed that Xurkitree and put it to the ground. And his walls were just broken by the Starmie set. Overall, obviously, going into Thundy on that Meloetta was the best play he made in that entire game. But I think that Tom could have put himself in a better position by getting the Doggo in more, spamming Thousand Arrows, because Steve's team is slow, has no ground resist, and has lack of reliable recovery. That is Doggo fodder. And I think he could have been in a better position just getting that in more often. I don't want to like critique his playstyle, but he definitely did do a lot of things good in this game. So he did, one thing I'd like to praise him on a little bit is going into Thundy, not going on tilt at the end of the game and just start sacking things off to the +2 Como, getting his best chance to knock it out with the Thundy, and it actually worked out for him, and he picked up a win versus Battler X.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up, because a lot of people will do that. They automatically panic, and there's another player who had a very panicky situation this week, and we'll go into it when we get higher up on the rankings. We'll talk about him, but I like that you did mention that Tom kept his composure and went into the one possible thing to outspeed the Como, and it did end up outspeeding it because Steve apparently only had 8 speed EVs on his Como, and it was at +2. So just to clarify also something that you said, the Thunderous did not switch in on the Meloetta. It was already in, and Meloetta came in and he went for a U-turn expecting to outspeed, and it got tricked to Scarf. So that was just, that was monumental. That was so lucky for Tom. And yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. Giving his Como a chance to set up by being in with Nidoqueen. That's the problem, though, with a lot of Tom's team that I also see, is that even though something walls something on his opponent's team, even if it ends up taking it down, it becomes setup fodder for something else. And it's been a recurring theme. You see that with Celesteela, because Celesteela can't hit everything with all of its coverage. Neither can Nidoqueen, neither can P2, neither can Vaporeon. There's a lot of problems with that defensive core, and I think he found that out through this season, and hopefully he doesn't draft a similar core in the future. But still, a great win for Tom this week. Like you said, I think he's still in playoff contention. That's why we're still talking about him. So I hope to see it continue into the next 2 weeks. Maybe he can pull it out. I think he's also 4-6, if I'm not mistaken. And he did suffer 2 huge 6-0 losses. So I don't know if he's going to be able to bring it back. But fingers crossed. We're big fans of Tom. He's a great guy. He's been running the GBA with help from others, of course, but very well. And we hope to see him continue to do well, if not this season, the next season. I think he's definitely improved from last season. So if that
without a doubt, he was the first overall pick, Aster.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so he's definitely improved, and we hope to see that carry on into the future. So moving on, in at number 9, I'm getting it right this time. In at number 9, we have Lars and the Borussia Dawn fan. Lars, I only dropped Lars down 1 spot after this week because his sets, honestly, to me, were perfect. His play was perfect, and I think he only lost because of those 2 endgame turns. The Blade clicking Shadow Sneak against a potential Trick Room Magearna, and then, again, Whimsicott clicking Tailwind against a Trick Room Magearna. It's hard to sweep with Magearna when all your opponent sees is Shift Gear. If Lars had gotten up the Trick Room, switched out into Donphan, predicting the Encore, even if the Whimsicott kills the Donphan, Magearna comes back in, clicks the Aura Sphere, and the game ends. So I think that kind of overthought on the end of the game really cost him. But when you see a Whimsicott, you're always thinking Encore. But situations like that, I can understand why he was put into a situation like that. But he should be winning games like that. That's the thing. And no offense to Gator whatsoever. I think Gator still played a great game, and we'll get to him. But Lars, I definitely think, should have had this game.
And I think I figured out the problem with Lars. I'm going to call this the Lars effect, at least for this season. It's the habit of winning a game and then proceeding to lose the very next game, and then repeating that process throughout an entire 12-week season. Because Lars just seems to win one, lose one, win one, lose one, win one, lose one, and he lost to Gator this week on a game he probably could have won very easily at the end with that Magearna, and he definitely is in not a bad position for playoffs. He still obviously has a chance, And I think you're right. A lot of his prep was really good. A few things I'll say, Lars, if they have 3 steel types and you get coverage for all of them with a Magearna, then run the coverage for the steel types because they're all coming because no one can over prep for a Magearna. There's never enough prep for a Magearna. And even they cannot beat, like, Magearna with its amazing coverage. The Solvet Celebi was interesting. I'm not sure, like, exactly what it covered on Gator's team, but, you know, more power to you. Everything else pretty straightforward, and like you said, was very solid bring. Play, you know, not a lot to say about his play. It was a very well-played game by Lars towards the end. I think it was just the lack of pulling the trigger at the end of the game, not wanting to go for your chance to actually win the game that really cost Lars, which is a very dangerous mindset in League format. Like, I'll be in situations, or I've seen people in situations where they literally just have to go into a Mon and set up early and they'll win, but they're just too scared to do it right away, and it could end up costing them the game even sometimes. That actually happened with another battler I'll get to later, probably not who you'd expect. But yeah, I think that Lars definitely is in a decent position. If he can just win 2 and lose and win his last 2 games instead of going 1-1, then I think he will be in a very, very good position to make playoffs, and he is a threat in the playoffs. He's got a very scary offensive team, and he's a very, very good player. So I think that can wrap it up for Lars for now. We're going to move on to Gym Leader Geo, and look at this kid. Who saw this guy coming, man? He's been on an absolute tear as of late, and now he's in a very solid playoff position at the top of his conference, and this man has been just winning, winning, winning. And I think the key to Geo's recent success has been embracing the bulk of his team. And, you know, where you have Tom, who's kind of struggling to use his bulk, Geo has, like, embraced it. Like, I've seen, like, 4 to 5 walls come each game now. I have no idea why that personally appeals to me. I have no idea at all, wink wink. However, he's been using his Umbreon extremely well. I think that is a very underrated Mon in League format. That's kind of one thing I really wanted to highlight. And I think he just brought the things he needed to wall out his opponent. Geo, I know you aren't sorry for this, but I'm just going to say it again. Don't be sorry to anyone. You just got to do what you got to do to have to win in this league, and it's unfortunate. This season's timer stalls have, like, been out of control. I think the fans know that. I think the coaches know that. And obviously we, the analysts, can't just ignore that because they have basically no restrictions. And if you're winning, you're winning. And that's the way this season is. We're not going to put a rule change in the middle. So I would say just, like, do it while you can because it's sometimes your best strategy of winning. Overall, though, he seemed to just be able to play defensively to stop John's offense and then got on the offensive in the late game in order to take down the Mons he needed to win.
You know, timer stalls this season, they're kind of like a bad relationship. It starts off okay, and you're okay with it, and then as problems keep surfacing, it just gets worse and worse. And with every timer stall this season, I've gone from not really minding them too much and thinking of them as a fair way to win. It's fine. We saw Cooper do it in the early season, and now it's just become absolutely atrocious. And I don't want to deal with it anymore, guys. My notes for Geo and John are the 3 letters CBA. Because I couldn't be bothered. I knew this match came down to a timer stall. I couldn't be bothered to even watch through the whole thing. It's just... Especially
since only 3 Mons were killed.
Yeah,
it's like a 2-1,
yeah,
1-1.
You look at the scoreline and it's ridiculous. 5-4? What happened? Like, it's... I'm just done. I'm just done. What I will say about Geo, though, because I do have to talk about him, is that I brought him up 4 spots this week, actually, as you guys can see on your screens. And while it was a timer stall win, and I just ranted about it, Geo should have been lifted up a little bit higher on my power rankings last week. And that's where I feel like I made a mistake. And Geo's really been showing, like Jar said, that he knows how to use his bulk. And not only that, he's made a huge adjustment this season in terms of his win conditions. We didn't see it this week, but we saw it over the past few weeks, and he's able to conserve win conditions so well now compared to how he was in the beginning of the season. I feel like I'm watching a completely different player at this point. So I'm really glad to see that old Geo back, and I have high hopes that with his record, I think he's 6-4 now. I think that he'll be able to make playoffs, and if he does, he's more than likely facing Envy, if I'm also not mistaken.
Oh gosh, that'll be interesting.
And yeah, that should be extremely interesting. I can't wait to see that matchup, honestly. I don't think they've played all season, have they?
No, I don't think so.
Yes.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's one thing to have Cooper do it like once, twice a season maybe in the previous years, but I think it's a combination with this game and the animations and how long they take, and just, you know, it's legal, so do it while you can. But I think we can just roll in with Crimson.
Yeah,
right? Crimson's
yeah, and I'm gonna be the one talking about Crimson. So.
All right, just steal my thunder. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it is my turn, Jar. I'm sorry. Okay, you just learned to read. Okay, we have this set up in a way. Anyway, Crimson this week. So what I have on him is I saw some good sets from Crimson this week. Things that can work. But I didn't see anything that stood out to me as, wow, Crimson, you killed it with this set. Everything was very straight edge. Maybe he didn't have as much time as usual, or maybe...
Really?
Maybe MV's team is an S-rank tier team, after all. Who knows? I would have definitely liked to see some more predictions, especially in regards to the play. Like the switch out to Lando on the Volt switch, things like that. Magnezone is going to do one of two things to Cobalion. Beta close combat and switch out, or be scarfed and Volt switch out. There's a turn where you have to understand why your opponent went into something that loses to the Mon that you have out at the moment. In theory, Magnezone should lose. Because Cobalion can carry Earthquake or Close Combat. There's no Berry that's saving it. It can't be Sturdy. Its Sturdy is broken. So there's nothing else that it could be but Scarfed or a Switch Out on that turn. Either way, Crimson is still being the Crimson we've known all season, kind of like Lars, up and down. The good news is that his good moments are amazing, but his bad moments aren't that bad.
Yeah, that's definitely what's keeping him at the top part of the power rankings. His wins are big. His losses, you know, not so much. This, I think, was his biggest loss of the season, which was only a 4-0. But the reason I didn't move him is because he dropped to Envy. And what's the point of having a #1 team if you're gonna like be mad at every other team for losing to them? They're the #1 team, all right? So I don't want to be super tough on him. He tried to bring tricks to the trick house, which has not worked for many coaches. The belly drum Smeargle pass was cool. I think it was executed at the worst time possible because there was nothing the Empoleon was going to do but click Scald, in my opinion. I think that was the optimal play for Envy, and I don't think Crimson really thought that play through as much as he should have, because it really could have done a lot of work if he'd gotten the pass to cure him later. But like I said, I thought his prep was very, very straightforward with some of the sets, but very, very nice touch of flair. But Crimson play was decent this week. Nothing special, like you said. He needs to... Envy was able to read Crimson every turn, and when that happens, you're going to lose 4-0. When your opponent can read you every single play of the game, you're not going to win. And you definitely saw that with, like you said, the Magnezone Landorus Cobalion exchange. He literally got every prediction right, and Crimson could not make a prediction that gave him any kind of momentum. And when you're playing a guy like Envy, the big thing is you cannot just be looking at the turn in front of you. You have to think about the next turn. What is Envy's optimal play to set him up well for the next turn? And that's what you have to play off of, because Envy is always going to make the optimal play. But I think that's enough talking about Crimson. He's doing alright so far. But I think we can move right on into John, correct? Because we both have John at number 6, even though he has a 5-5 record, which I believe Steve-O does at 13 too, so a lot of 5-5 records. But I have to feel bad for John, man. This guy, I think, has maybe been on the receiving end of the most timeout losses this season. Don't quote me on that, but like if one of you in the comments can let me know if I'm actually right, I think he definitely has to be up there at the least, because he's had 2 these last 2 weeks. And you know, I don't think he's been prepping badly. I don't think he's necessarily been playing badly. I think he's just getting really unlucky. He definitely has the team to, like I've said at the beginning of this season, at the draft analysis, go all the way back to that. I said he has the team to win it all, and I think he's been playing and prepping very well. He's just getting very unlucky. So it's very hard to judge. It's very hard to evaluate the play. As you know, I didn't bring up many specifics in the game versus Geo just because it was another very long, drawn-out timeout with very few KOs. On John's prep, I do want to talk about this a little because I think there were a few shortcomings. I don't think E-Belt Bulu with Leech Seed sub was a good set. I think SD3 attack would have been better because he has an Amoonguss, and I actually ran this calc. A +2 Expert Belt Adamant Tapu Bulu, Oko's Max Amoonguss. So, yeah. So I think the prep was a little lax there. I don't think it was exactly thought out, because Amoonguss is coming in on Bulu 100% of the time. Why run sub Leech Seed Bulu? I don't see it working. Uxie was a good pivot. Gudra had the coverage to break Geo's team down. It just wasn't really powerful enough, which is Goodra's biggest problem. It's never really powerful enough to break down those walls. But John's biggest mistake this game was not bringing a wall breaker Pokemon. Look at his team. Scarfape, Bulu without Swords Dance, and then the rest was basically Bulk, and Goodra was his only other offensive mon. 0 wall breakers. Nothing that can just smash through Geo's team. And when Geo has been bringing those 4 to 5 walls a week, the only way you're going to beat him is by punching through them as hard as you can. And that is risky, because if you bring those wall breakers and Geo decides, maybe I'll go offensive, you're in trouble. But I think that was John's mistake this week, was not anticipating the bulk. The bulk came, and John lost. So he definitely still has playoff potential. He's love his team, love his play, love his prep. He just needs to turn it around, but he does have to play MV this next week, so we'll see if John can remain in the playoff race.
I think he has a little bit more than playoff potential, Jar, because he's not 5-5, he's 6-4, just so you know. Secondly, 2 of those losses have now come to timer stalls, and one of them was against MV himself, who he's up against again next week. So I think that John is doing an amazing job this season. If it was not for the timer stalls, I think that I don't know if he would have beat Geo had it dragged on, but he would have definitely beaten Lars, and he would have had a 7-3 record by now. So, I mean, it's with John, I'm still optimistic, always optimistic. These are just timer stall losses. I'm not losing faith, and I'm not going to talk so much about the game because, again, I couldn't be bothered to do too much research on it, but with John, I am still impressed with the way that he's playing. You did mention, and I did agree with the lack of a fully offensive Bulu. Running Leech Seed was just bad call, because Swords Dance would have plowed through Geo's team. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for John, to be perfectly honest with you guys. Now we can move on into our top 5, and kicking it off, we do have Gator and the Florida Gators. Now, we did go over this game. I think Gator did play a solid game. I don't know how I feel about like the nearsightedness of. I didn't actually listen to his commentary, but I don't know if I agree with the nearsightedness of a shift gear Magirna, because I felt like that's what he was trying to stop the entire time. And Trick Room is a very viable option. Shift Gear is not the only set, but I can understand his fear of it, and going into Whimsicott and setting up the Tailwind at the end of the game. Overall, he played very well. He never let his Deblade get into a matchup with the Dawn Fan until the very end of the game, so he did a very good job of keeping that matchup from happening in the first place, because Dawn Fan just fired off free Earthquakes against Gator's team every single time. So I think he did a very good job there. And ultimately, he does end up pulling out, what was it, a 2-0? Because the Fire Blast KO'd the Lucario at the end of the game. So
yep, I believe it was a 2-0.
Yeah, so he still comes out with a 2-0. He's got a solid record moving into the following week. I think he's also 6-4, just like John. He's plus 11 as well in his differential. So he's looking quite solid. I think he's almost locked in for playoff contention. One more win automatically puts him through. It's a very tight race up at the top, not so much at the bottom, but definitely at the top. And Gator's been proving to us that he is very quickly adapting to Draft League format. He's able to be creative, and I just need to, the only thing I want to see from him now to the end of the season and moving into playoffs is not so much focusing on one set at a time and looking at every possible option, because we did see it in the past with Dan, with A-Drive. He brought specifically, I mean, he did a good job switching out into his Latios, predicting the Tectonic Rage, but he brought his Deblade specifically for the Terrakion, when Terrakion can technically beat Deblade if it has that Z move. So I just want to see a little more adaptation there, but overall, Gator's been doing an amazing job.
I think that stuff will just come with the more experience he gets in League format. Remember, this is Gator's first ever League format season, and he's doing a really good job. He's obviously a great player. No one has any doubts about that. And he put on another impressive, showing this week, you know, holding my faith in him strong after I put him up there a few weeks ago. That was quite a while ago now. But his prep, Aqua Ferrothorn, very, very smart. If you take away Ferrothorn's fire weakness, I think it is very much the best wall in the game, like on Rain. I beat Aster the Plug this week, guys. I did it. But I really liked his Heat Transset. EQ plus Fire Blast actually puts a real hurt on Lars' team if you look at it. and he brought the 3 steel core, which was a foolproof plan. But no, the Don fan was spamming EQs, but no, it was a good idea. Halucha was cool, and he rounded out the team well with his offense, with Diggersby and nice support in Whimsicott, and he just showed that he's basically a top-tier player. His play was amazing in this game. He set up the situation he needed. You're exactly right, though. He could have lost this game very easily at the end because of his inexperience in League format and just focusing on, all right, what's one set? But in that situation, Aster, you're either expecting Trick Room or you're expecting Shift Gear. If that thing had been Shift Gear and he played for a Trick Room variant, he could have lost to it in the same way. Maybe not as much because he would have needed 2 Shift Gears to outspeed the Whimsicott with the Tailwind in the late game, but definitely an interesting game. He had an end game in his mind, which is something I've praised a lot, and he executed it. So, Gator, I like what you're doing. You pulled out a win, and you can secure playoffs next week. I believe in you, and I think that can let us move on to, I'm sure, something that a lot of you would have liked to hear me talk about last week, but I was unfortunately not here. Monotsui dropped to my number 4 last week, and stayed in Aster's top 3, so I know OMG Jar actually dropped Mono at the top 3. How blasphemy, I swear. But I think Mono has not been exactly the same player we saw in the first few weeks. And I don't know if his team is just like a one-trick pony and it's easier to prep for the second time around for a lot of teams. But I just feel like Duncan, first of all, as addressed last week, Lars was in control of the whole game last week, it felt like. Duncan this week played him very, very close and definitely could have pulled out a game with a few extra big things. So I know it's weird for me to not have him in the top 3 because we both talked about how he's been one of the top battlers this season. I stand by that, but I feel like it's been a lack of creativity in his sets and prep that I haven't seen really these last few weeks, and he really needs to catch that fire with creativity again. Mantine was solid. I mean, Florges was solid, not too creative on the wall course, but Efrachi was like smart. Gren, Life Orb, Bisharp, basic stuff, and right on Eviolite. I mean, his prep was standard. Basically, every set that he brought, you could expect that set pretty easily on the other side, and that's why I think Mono's been losing a few games lately. He did pull out a win this week, though, and it really did encourage me how to see him overcome some adversity with the Zen headbutt miss, preserving his offensive win cons to the end that he needed. He did address how he didn't understand or know if the Weavile hacks mattered, but Duncan himself said Weavile wasn't too important in this game, so Duncan kind of hurting your argument there on the hacks. But 2 big move misses that cost him a lot. But Mono, he's looking solid. He overcame adversity, and I like the way he is looking going into playoffs. I believe he did clinch with this win, though.
Yeah, I also do believe he did clinch. Now, the reason that I'm not moving Mono down again this week, and I'm keeping George at number 4, is because Mono and George had very similar situations this week. They both had games where they could have lost very easily, and they didn't. So I'm going to keep them exactly where they are. With Mono, for me, I agree completely with you. I think that his creativity is lacking. The thing is, his sets are still solid. They're solid for the matchups that they're coming for, but they're very standard. So we don't get to see any flair, but sometimes you don't need flair. And it's been carrying him through. Again, if the Zen Headbutt missed, it would have been a completely different scoreline. It wouldn't have been a 1-0. The Venusaur would have been dead. So it's very hard to judge him on what happened when you have a haxy game like that between 2 players where there's a bunch of moves going off that miss, especially moves with like 85 or above percentage of accuracy that just keep missing. It's very hard to evaluate, but Mono still played the end game. The end game he played amazingly. He knew exactly what he needed to do, and he hoped and prayed and crossed his fingers that the Venusaur would just die to the Life Orb, and it did. Which was it was funny to hear his commentary. I like to hear Mono panic sometimes because you don't get to see it a lot. He's very calm usually, and he was very he seemed very,
that is serial killer like.
Yeah, exactly. He was very on edge, it seemed. Not so much in the commentary, but you could feel it in the way that he was describing how he felt during the game. So I like to see that moment of weakness for him. It kind of brings him back down to earth and reminds us that Mono is not a god, especially that he's not up at our number 1 anymore, and he hasn't been for a few weeks. So that's it for Mono. Moving on to my number 3, my number 4, excuse me, and Jar's number 3, of course. We do have George and the San Francisco Arcaniners. And George this week, again, it was another game where he could have easily lost. He did get a little lucky in this game with the Poison Jab crit at the end. And I think he played the endgame around Victini, though, so well that it didn't even matter, and he just sealed the game. That's what I like about George in his commentary. He makes it seem like he's extremely panicked, just like Mono doesn't make it seem like he's panicked about a situation, but you know that when the game was happening, he kept a level head enough to know to be able to outplay the Victini's Trick Room turns, and he did it super well. We saw that same situation near the end of the season last season. I think it was Envy versus Lars. Envy outplayed Trick Room so well, and George did exactly the same thing. I also love that we got to see a moment of weakness once again in George, which we haven't seen in a few weeks. Literally, all you have to do against players of his caliber is get a little bit creative. Stop trying to be so safe, and good things will happen. Unfortunately, that's not the end result because of the crit on Clef, but 93.5% of the time, you're either going to make it a very close loss or win over a player like that. But good, George, keep on with your composure. Keep playing the way that you're playing. You're never going to lose that way if you just keep going that way. He played his sets so well, and that's why he stays at number 4 for me. You bumped him up to number 3, which last week, which I also agree with. I mean, they're pretty much interchangeable at this point. Mono's been interchangeable with a lot of people this season, so yeah, that's what I have on George.
Yeah, so I'll be quick because we were trying to shorten this video since we did get to talk about 3 people, but we're already at 41 minutes. So George did make it into Jar's top 3, so his hashtag came true because I felt like I've seen a lot better stuff from George than I've been seeing from Mono lately. And that's been lately, so I think that requires me to put him higher in the power rankings. I don't know if this is a give a mouse a cookie and he'll want a glass of milk situation, if George will be in the chat writing Arcaniners for top 2, but we will see. George has been... He's last year's champ. We can't disacknowledge that. And these last few weeks should be scary for everyone in the league because he has picked up a lot of wins in a row. His prep was smart. The Garchomp was great. Very smart set. Spexentente was the only set I was like, yeah, you sure about that? He's a Toxapex. But gotta bring the Tridoggo core when you can, so it's tough to be hard on him. He was able to play around Dan's threats nicely and basically stay hot a little and make not the best possible plays at times, but that's just going to happen in Pokemon. Like you said, the Poison Jab did kind of skew the endgame. We don't know exactly how it would have gone, but he's keeping up a winning streak. He's avoiding the Lars effect, and he is looking good going forward to playoffs. So I like George, and I think we can move on to the top 2 players in the league. That's right, I can hear the keyboards typing now. Chimp and Envy, again, 1 and 2. How happy you guys must be. But, you know, I truly believe anyone in the GBA, especially the top half, but anyone can beat anyone on any given day. So, Chimp, he's going to be at 2 because he played a very good game this week. And I feel like his prep, I only need to address one set, a perfectly brought Azu set. And when I said there was a person who earlier could have won the game a lot sooner with higher differential, I think that was Chimpact. I think Chimp pretty much could have gone for the Azu sweep the second he could bring it in. Tup had nothing for it. His walls were too slow to outspeed it and to live a +6 player off. Everything else was fast and frail and died to Aqua Jet, and that was exactly the case for this game. Chimp brought it in a little bit later than I would have liked him to, and he basically cleaned up the game. It was very straightforward. I don't have a lot to say about Chimp. He's looking good going into playoffs. He is also on a bit of a winning streak, which is good to see. And Chimp, good job. All I'm going to say.
Yeah, I have the same thing to say about Chimp, honestly. It was just well-brought sets. I think that he had a perfect matchup against what Tup brought. It was... I looked at the matchup when I saw it, and it was played on Showdown, and I was just like, wait a minute. How is Tup going to beat this? There's just no way. And that's exactly what happened. So, yes, Chimp's on a great winning streak. I hope that he carries that into playoffs. He's really adapted to his team super well. I don't think he ever really had an adaptation period. I think he just always loved his team, and he's been doing well with it since the beginning of the season.
I know Chimp doesn't like his team that much, actually.
Yeah, I mean, but I think he's gotten to the point where he's comfortable with it. Not necessarily that he loves it. I'm sure that he would have drafted a different team had he gotten the chance to, and he's already confirmed that to us, but he definitely has gotten comfortable with his team, and I love what he's doing with it. The combination of Volcanion, Kyurem, and Azumarill is working just so well together, and then just that round out with Thundurus is just I love this team, and I hope that Chimp continues this winning streak into the last 2 weeks, and maybe we can see him pick up his first championship. That would be really cool. But moving on into our number 1, yes, once again, we do have, of course, the Lord himself, S-tier draft, like I said earlier. Envy, GG, it's Envy. He was really able to read every single play that Crimson made this week perfectly. We mentioned it before with Crimson. It kind of helps when your opponent makes a grand total of 0 plays. I really like the superpower play though on Cobalion with the Landorus. That was nice. It's incredible that MV is able to see things like Shukaberry, HP Ice Cobalion coming from a mile away. That's very impressive. Like, that's only from very high caliber players that you see that. You have to have played like past generations and seen things like that. Like, you had Pasho Berry, Tyranitar in Gen 4. You had all these sets that don't make a lot of sense now, but because you have that knowledge, that prior knowledge of things being able to check other things with berries and with hidden powers, Envy is able to have Farsight, kind of, as opposed to Gator, who was just focused on the shift gear. Envy is able to see everything. He's able to see the field on Wi-Fi like a chessboard, and it's beautiful to see. There's not much to say. MV continuing at the end of the season clean sweep, as I said he would. Let's see if he can do it for 2 more weeks in a row. We'll have to wait till Sunday to find out.
Yeah, and I'm actually really excited for this Sunday because, as I said it earlier, Envy's going to play John, and he did play John earlier and kind of dunked on him. We gave John a lot of shit that week because we didn't feel like he played his best possible game, but I do feel like John is definitely has like a steam in his heart now after 2 timeout losses. And I think Envy, you know, he's obviously still the favorite going into it, but it'll be an interesting game. And Envy, again, #1, guys. I mean, he's doing what a #1 team does. He's winning every game. I mean, that's just how it goes. Again, we will address, and I personally believe his schedule probably a little easier than most people's with just how it ended up working. But you saw some classic Envy with the Choice Scarf Landorus. I said it in the draft analysis. It's going to be Choice Scarf for Yachi most weeks since it's not a Zmon. But he actually brought some things we hadn't seen too much of. The Banded Kingdra was cool with Rain, which he hasn't brought too many times. Well worth the 2nd round pick still. Assault Vested Muck was cool. Definitely got away from his Figgy Berry set. But it was an extremely good prep for the matchup. The Dual Scarf Volt Turn worked really well. He played around Cobalion beautifully, even though, like you said, Crimson really didn't try to make a play to capitalize on it. And it kind of showed why he's the #1 team. But the thing is, Envy, I'm interested to see him in playoffs because he hasn't played anybody like Chimp. He hasn't played a George. He hasn't played Mono. And that is going to, I want to see what happens when he plays one of those guys because he hasn't been like challenged. I know Chimp and Mono have played. I know George has played, hasn't George played Mono? He's played Chimp, I know that. So they've all been going back and forth, but Envy's just kind of chilling over there, doing Envy things. So he rounds out the #1, but I think that is it for the power rankings this week. Sorry, we did make it still very long, even though we cut out 3 teams. It'll be better next week when we cut out even more teams who get eliminated, but for now, Aster, please take us out.
I think we still did a pretty good job. I think we get a lot of detail in, and you guys really get to hear our thought process, and I think you appreciate that more than having a short video. At least I think you guys do, and a lot of you do. So I hope you guys enjoyed having Jar back this week and not just having myself speak for a 50-minute video. I sure as heck was happy to have him back, so thank you for joining me today, Jar. And guys, if you did enjoy Power Rankings, make sure to leave a like down below. Subscribe to the GBA channel if you haven't already to catch all of this content. Comes out daily. And make sure to check out all of your coaches as well in the description down below. And we will see you guys next week. Ciao.
Bye.